This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today, we'll feel and experience Los Angeles in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, featuring an interview with legendary Prince Stash.
And in those days, Los Angeles was, especially the Sunset Strip area, had no high-rise buildings at all. In Hollywood and all that region. And when you got to Doheny, Sunset and Doheny, the countryside started. It was absolutely spectacular, driving through Beverly Hills all the way down to the beach.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to experience Los Angeles in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Los Angeles has always been a city that reinvented itself with every new decade. Each era has always had its own unique vibe, colored by the cultural, social, and political upheavals of the time. Imagine stepping into Los Angeles in the 1960s. The air is thick with the scent of jasmine and revolution. The city is a sprawling canvas, alive with the sounds of surf rock echoing from the beaches and the passionate cries for civil rights in the streets. The counterculture movement was in full swing, and the Sunset Strip was its pulsating heart. Clubs like the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Troubadour were the breeding grounds for future legends like the Doors and Janis Joplin. In the summer of 1965, the Watts riots erupted, a powerful, painful reminder of the racial tensions simmering beneath the surface. The six-day uprising left the city scarred, but also more aware and determined to seek change. Amidst the turmoil, UCLA became a hotbed for activism, with students rallying against the Vietnam War and advocating for free speech. Yet, there was a sense of possibility in the air. In the bohemian neighborhood of Laurel Canyon, artists and musicians gathered, creating a tight-knit community where creativity flowed freely. Imagine Jim Morrison scribbling lyrics on a napkin at a local cafe while Joni Mitchell strummed her guitar nearby, weaving her own musical magic. The 1970s brought a different kind of energy to Los Angeles. It was a decade of disco, glitz, and glamour, but also one of the gritty realism and social consciousness. The nightlife in LA was legendary. Clubs like Studio 54's West Coast counterpart, the Odyssey, became the playgrounds for celebrities where the lines between reality and fantasy blurred. At the same time, the gritty streets of Venice Beach were filled with skateboarders from the Z-Boys who were revolutionizing the sport and culture. In 1974, the city was captivated by the story of Patty Hearst, the heiress who was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army. Her subsequent transformation from captive to revolutionary shocked and fascinated the nation, reflecting the decade's chaotic and unpredictable spirit. The old Hollywood sign was demolished and a new one was constructed in 1978, still symbolizing dreams of fame and fortune. The city was a place where you could reinvent yourself, where everyone had a story of arrival and ambition. Hollywood itself also underwent a transformation with the rise of New Hollywood. Directors like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola were pushing boundaries and redefining cinema. Los Angeles was both a muse and a stage, capturing the imagination of filmmakers and audiences alike. The 1980s in Los Angeles were marked by excess and innovation. The city was riding high on a wave of economic prosperity, and it showed. The skyline was dotted with cranes, a testament to the booming real estate market. The beaches were filled with bronzed bodies, and the streets were filled with fast cars and even faster lifestyles. This was the era of Hollywood blockbusters and the birth of the modern celebrity culture. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the Terminator, Madonna was the Material Girl, and Michael Jackson's Thriller was redefining music and entertainment. The city was a playground for the rich and famous, and places like Beverly Hills epitomized luxury and opulence more than ever before. Yet, beneath the surface of wealth and glamour, there were undercurrents of tension. The crack cocaine epidemic hit hard, and neighborhoods like South Central were deeply affected, leading to a rise in crime and gang violence. The 1984 Summer Olympics, however, brought a sense of unity and pride, showcasing LA to the world as a city of possibilities and dreams. In the heart of downtown, a different kind of revolution was taking place. The punk rock scene was thriving, with bands like X and Black Flag leading the charge. Venues like the Roxy and the Whiskey A Go Go were filled with the raw energy of youth rebelling against the status quo. Los Angeles in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was a city of contrasts and contradictions. It was a place where dreams were both made and shattered, where the line between reality and illusion was often blurred. It was a city that embraced change, constantly evolving and reinventing itself, a place where the past and future seemed to collide in the most spectacular ways. And here we are. Welcome to Los Angeles. I'm beyond honored to have Prince Stash here with me. Stanislas Klossowski de Rola is an author, entrepreneur, actor, singer, and music producer. He performed and worked with various bands, including the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Vince Taylor and the Playboys, during the Swinging Sixties in London, Rome, Paris, and Los Angeles. Made infamous for his arrest with the Rolling Stones founder Brian Jones, his engagement to Italian superstar Romina Power, and for being a fashion icon launching the new romantic look that was all the rage in the 70s, Prince Stash comes from a line of scandalous and very colorful figures in his ancestry. Prince Stash currently spends his time between his Italian castle, Californian beach house, and other exotic international locations. Please check out his website at www.princestash.com and his Instagram at prince.stash. Prince Stash will share with us what it felt like to be in the epicenter of it all in Los Angeles in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Hello, Stash.
Hello, Masha.
Oh my God. What a delight it is for me to have you on my podcast today. Thank you so much for finding the time for our conversation.
Well, I'm extremely glad to do it.
Thank you, Stash. So you have such a rich history and you have lived in some of the most vibrant cities in the world, including Los Angeles. So what initially drew you to the diverse and eclectic city of LA, and how did you eventually decide to settle in Malibu?
First of all, I came on, let's say, on 4 different major occasions. The first time I came was had been in New York. The first time I was ever in America was in 1962. Right after New Year's, 1963 began. I took a Greyhound bus in order to see the whole country and took 3 days to get to LA, and then bought a car and started exploring the place, armed with a movie star map. I drove from downtown LA to the beach, actually, and all the way on Sunset Boulevard. And in those days, Los Angeles was, especially the Sunset Strip area, had no high-rise buildings at all in Hollywood and all that region. And when you got to Doheny, Sunset and Doheny, the countryside started. It was absolutely spectacular, driving through Beverly Hills all the way down to the beach. Remarkable place, and it was a very different town in 1963. And I had a letter of introduction from the director I'd been working with, Marc Allégret, who had been with André Gide to the Congo, and who became a very famous director, who did numerous films, etc. And I was both his actor and his assistant. When I went after making a film called Les Démons de Minuit with Charles Boyer, Pascal Petit, a stellar cast, I went off to study acting in New York and then eventually made my way to LA. I had one letter of introduction from Marc Allégret to Sam Goldwyn Jr. So I settled at the now defunct, doesn't exist anymore, the Sunset and Doheny Motel, and called up Sam Goldwyn's office. And lo and behold, the secretary put me right through. And I was there, hardly turned 20 years old. And they received me the next morning at 10. And eventually I ended up, being a kind of intern, although I was more of an honored guest than some unpaid slave that you would be nowadays in show business, and film business is very hierarchical. And
yes.
You can't talk to people outside of the department where you're working, and you can't hobnob with the stars, all of which I did. A billionaire's son nowadays could not do what I did in those days. And I had a very rich tapestry of experiences within the film industry, and television industries and met all the great directors, the great cinematographers. Many months I was here. And so that was one extraordinary experience. And I went back to Europe. And when I came back to LA, it was, of course, a completely 2 years later. I had long hair. I was a 22-year-old rock star, and I came with the offshoot of the Vince Taylor band. And we rented a huge mansion on St. Ives Drive, which is above Sunset and off shoot of Doheny Drive, sort of on the edges of Beverly Hills, more or less. So we were there, and it became a party central. And of course, every long-haired musician in Los Angeles ended up being at my house, which was a kind of party central, which led to an infuriating neighborhood taking petition against me. And eventually I decided that the best part of valor was to go away. I had a crazy landlady from Texas who kept saying, join me in a lawsuit against the whole neighborhood. But, and all these, anyway, it was tumultuous, to say the least. During that time, Bob Rafelson and Bert Snyder offered me the lead in a show they wanted to do, and they kept, touting it as the most extraordinary thing. It was going to be an avant-garde show, like Hard Day's Night every week. And I was sorely disappointed when they handed the pilot over for me to read, because it was the Monkees. And I thought, oh my God, I'd done so many extravagant avant-garde things in Paris at the American Center with Jodorowsky and with lots and lots of people. And I was playing in this, we were doing this. We wanted to play all this extraordinary proto-rap music and all kinds of things that I would end up playing with Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones a couple of years later. But we had tons of offers, and in fact were brought to LA, encouraged to come by the Everly Brothers, and who had a bass player who was an A&R man at A&M Records. But A&M Records was a teeny little outfit on Sunset, a one-story walk-up with very reception, a hallway, the offices, and then the studio. Everything was teeny, and it was such a great atmosphere. And we got demos there, and the bass player of the Everly Brothers was the A&R man at A&M. That's how we got there. So we met Sonny and Cher. We met so many musicians, from the Byrds to Love to the Grassroots to all these, the Chambers Brothers. It was just a magnificent experience because it was so vibrant during that time.
Yes.
It was a year before the Doors came out. Among the people who frequented my house was Frank Zappa, who was completely unknown at the time. He was in an avant-garde band called the Mothers of Invention with a guy that I knew, Carl Franzoni. And, it was a fascinating time. And we all the long-haired freaks around LA would meet at Ben Frank's on Sunset, which created a havoc, and it was all the countercultures would meet there. And eventually so much police interference occurred that we moved down to Cantor's on Fairfax. So that was 1965, at the end of which, of course, I went away, I turned down doing the Monkees because I didn't think it would even get on the air. And I was so disappointed by the script of the pilot. And poor Bob Rafelson and Bert Snyder were crestfallen that I didn't want to do it. But I was, none of the other people who became the Monkees were even in the running at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very interesting time.
Yes.
And so after that, I didn't come back for 5 years. So 1970 is another chapter.
Okay.
I came back because, there's a soon to appear, by the end of this year, by Christmas, there will be a book which Chris Campion is writing along with the film director Anthony Foots, who who's an LA-born guy who's the son of a Disney animator. He grew up in LA, but now wouldn't dream of being here. He lives in Ireland. But in 1970, he did this cult film, a $0 budget. However, one of the most extravagantly interesting film. What he did shoot would cost tens of millions of dollars to do, and everything was donated by all the parties involved, including Doug Trumbull, who did the special effects for 2001, who donated all his services, all these things. And it was such an extraordinary film that we did, because this book is coming out, we did a promo at my house. So they came and interviewed me and filmed me doing this major speech that I had at the end of the film. And it could have been, it's as appropriate today as it was then, about pollution and all those climate troubles and all that kind of things.
Yes.
Extraordinary, yeah.
Wow. And what was the name of that film?
Saturation 70. And the book is going to be about that.
Mm-hmm.
They raised a lot of money on a crowdfunding effort for this coffee table book, which will include beautiful documents, because most of the footage was stolen or lost and in a dispute. And there's only one sequence of the film that remains.
Mm-hmm.
Among the main actors was Graham Parsons, Graham Parsons, who was a wonderful musician, who was the leader of the Flying Burrito Brothers, and who had been in the Byrds at the time of Sweetheart of the Rodeo. He was just like an angel, and he recorded that album, Grievous Angel. A great, great friend, and I was the captain of the Cosmic Kiddies, and he was my lieutenant. And the star of the whole film was a little boy who was Brian Jones, the founder and leader of the Rolling Stones, his son, who is now married to Donovan. So during that time, I also was doing a project with Roger Vadim at MGM, with a host of stars. I was writing a script with Gene Roddenberry and a whole bunch of people, and we were actually rivals as to who would get the best script off the ground for a film called Pretty Maids All in a Row. And my own transgressive material, oddly enough, some of it has survived into the final cut, which is rather amusing.
Wow, that's incredible.
And so, but at the same time, within the possibilities, I was also on tour with Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs, and Englishmen and we played. But I could only due to my film duties, I could only do a few gigs with them. So I played Oklahoma, Texas, and then Northern California, Winterland, and the Fillmore West, and Santa Monica. And my last gig was in Santa Monica, in fact, with Mad Dogs and Englishmen.
Very interesting.
And so that was that, 1970 came to an end. I went back to Europe, and I didn't come back for 10 years to California. And in 1980, I only came just, to attend a couple of things, and was back, I suppose, briefly in 1980, 81. I suppose I came through in 84 again, but it was just more of a matter of a few weeks than any length of time. And then I was brought here for a film project in 88 when I came over to America with Ron Wood of the Rolling Stones, and we both were involved in a club in Florida called Woody's on the Beach. And one of the investors flew me in because he had a film project he wanted me to participate. And I ended up moving from London to LA and being posted. This producer was leasing the house that I now occupy in Malibu, which, lo and behold, belonged to my very old friend, Denny Cordell, the very famous rock and roll producer and head of Shelter Records, who, discovered Tom Petty and who had a host of incredible talent. He's the one who produced Whiter Shade of Pale for Procol Harum in the 60s. And, extraordinary, very, very famous music, very wonderful man who died sadly an untimely death. But he was the one who put the second story on the house I now occupy, where a host, a galaxy of rock stars have lived over the years, including Bob Marley. Trailers in 1973. My house here was built in 1945 and 46, I beg your pardon, and by a man called Dudley Murphy, who was also in the film business. Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth, at the end of their marriage, briefly lived here as well in those days.
Wow, what a history. And so you decided to settle in Malibu. No wonder why at this house. And
well, I settled. The house was in very poor shape. So at first, I was very spoiled, and I came in. I thought, oh, what's this thing? And to be down at the beach. I wanted to be where the action was. And I had a friend who had a beautiful house in the hills, and it was a party place with lots of beautiful girls and all that. And I thought, well, he's giving me his guest house. If I want it, I might take him up on it. Luckily, I stayed an extra night in Malibu and then saw that what I could do with this place and stayed put. And eventually, I became a part of this outfit, the company that owned it, the junior member. And then in the 90s came an occasion, in the latter part of the 90s, there was an occasion to buy them out, and I was able to do that. And so I've owned this place since 97.
Wow, that's a long time.
I've technically lived in it since 1988, since the summer of 88.
Yes, yes. So, Stash, people often talk about the energy of places and how it can actually influence your state of being. So, how would you describe the energy of the house where you live right now? And also, how does it correlate to the energy of Malibu? And would you say that it has impacted your work and maybe your even personal philosophy?
Well, let me put it this way. I lived in cities frantically since I was 17 years old. So I lived in Rome, Paris, London, etc., New York, and then Los Angeles. And I used to love the whole city scene. I don't anymore. And when I came to Malibu, I eventually, as I grew older, I eventually grew to a point where I just enjoyed the place where I am right now, where you only hear the waves, basically. You are at the end of a beach road, and there are no cars, nothing, because, the road dead ends at my front door.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this extraordinary view, and these views that are unparalleled anywhere in Malibu. And I don't really, I don't socialize by and large. A lot of people come and see me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not some sort of hermit. I have a lot of meetings on Zoom and all that, but I do have a music studio for a start. I have a great library. And thus I was able, for instance, to spend the whole pandemic, just huddling practically on my own. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Wow, wow, that's beautiful that you can actually create this whole world for yourself. And the world is within you anyways, but also to enjoy living in it is so much more important.
Well, first for a start, I don't need to be validated by being with crowds. I'd rather, I get invited to tons of events and things, and I'm very selective as to whether I will go or not. It depends. I just don't, I no longer, obviously, I'm getting on in my life. This year I will be 82, and I'm still very active and so on.
Wow.
But the whole, I grew up in nightclubs and things like that, and it doesn't interest me any longer. So
I understand.
I don't have any interest in restaurants and all that kind, bars and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I must say that you are a very young 82 years old. I mean, you actually look much younger. And then how active you are and how brilliant your mind is, it's really, really incredible. And it is an honor for me, to have a conversation with you and to hear everything that you have to share. And then my next question to you would be, what is the most surprising lesson that you have learned about life and creativity through your incredible journey and through your very, very flamboyant and vibrant life? So what is this most surprising lesson that you have learned?
I will tell you, the much maligned Ike Turner, whose character was assassinated by the film What's Love Got to Do with It, for dramatic reasons. As Ike himself had said, I'm not a saint, but he'd come out of jail and he was not in a position to refuse the money they were offering on condition that he couldn't raise an objection. Having said that, Ike Turner was one of the greatest and most exquisite musicians I've ever known. He was very much my mentor. And when he asked me to do something on guitar, I kind of tried to waffle, saying, oh, well, I can't do this because... And I made all sorts of excuses, saying, oh, I learned with, Mick Jagger, he got good, I didn't, I was friends with Jimi Hendrix, all that kind of rubbish. And he said, nonsense, you just have to make it your own. And in a sense, Ike Turner taught me how to, made me come to realize that one's own worst enemy is within. You have the enemy within who says, oh, you can't do that, and you're your own worst critic and the rest of it. And if you can defeat the enemy within and say, well, I can jolly well do that, you can.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of bragging or anything, but it's just a question of doing it and being convinced that one can do it rather than be convinced of the opposite. That's perhaps, and with Ike, I learned that I could do anything, and I had been I had the gift as a child to play piano, but they wanted me to learn in a very nasty manner. In the 40s, they were very abusive to children, and they hit you on your fingers with steel rulers and made you write things. And people were very, one was brought up in a very rough manner, as it were, by the adult world. And so it put me off for some time. But I now constantly play all kinds of instruments, classical and, I improvise in the Baroque mode on the harpsichord, the church organ, and all those type of things, and have been recording along those lines, as well as playing sort of jazz, and I'm much more interested in complex musics than in just pop music.
Wow, that's beautiful, beautiful, Stash. And my next question to you would be, well, you worked with some of the most incredible bands in the history of music, with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. and you must have known them, very closely, very intimately, and you've observed them quite a bit. So what advice would you actually give to aspiring artists and musicians who are looking to make their mark in Los Angeles, which is a very competitive and diverse city?
You know what? I looked at your question and I thought, people think they can give advice, but there's no advice that can be given. Why? Because it was such a different time and circumstances. I have no idea how you could begin to make an impact. The only thing I can say is, do not look, if you're a musician or an artist, do not just try to do it to become famous. You might become famous, but that should not be your goal. You should do what feels true to you and pursue your course regardless of what anybody says. And above all, not listen to anybody's advice.
Right. That is so true.
Because, how can there is no way that anything that was current in the 60s or later, when there was a record business, when things, had a certain given, nothing is like that anymore. What can you say? There's AI, there's all these things happening. You just have to stick to your guns, hone your skills, and carry on and enjoy your life. Do not try to be anything other than an artist.
Yes, yes. Well, this is so beautiful, and this is exactly what actually everybody should do. Yes, as you say, stick to your guns, hone your skill, and carry on, because this is the one thing that you can do. And when you're really passionate about something, this fire within you will actually probably be the guide for you to get to the place where you need to be exactly at the right time.
Remember, so many people, because success should not be gauged with, for a life to be successful, it shouldn't be judged, oh, you're famous or you're notorious or you're making lots of money. That's all in itself very, it's better to be rich than poor, there's no doubt about it, but it shouldn't be the goal of one's life. One's life, as if one has the gift of being an artist, rich or poor, one should just stick with it and just be it and reject conventional attitudes and by no means follow anybody's path.
Yes, yes. So true. Stash, thank you so much for this incredibly inspiring conversation. And I feel that just by speaking with you, I learned yet again about myself. And I hope that the listeners will listen to, our conversation, and they will have, more inspiration for themselves. So thank you for doing what you do and for being who you are, and, continue with this positivity and with this incredible way of sharing your heart. Thank you so much, Sash.
Well, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Until next time.
Until next time, exactly.
Thank you very much for tuning in to feel and experience Los Angeles in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with my special guest, Prince Stash. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform, and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California and check out my website www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. I'm a realtor with Beverly & Company Luxury Properties, and my license number is 019-78714. Selling and buying homes with soul is not just my real estate strategy. It is an intuitive and holistic approach that embraces your values, aspirations, and conscious intentions. If you want to discover the power of mindfulness in your real estate journey with my compassionate guidance, I'm here for you. When people think of Los Angeles, naturally, they often picture the glitz and glamour of the movie industry. However, the city's rich theater scene plays a great role too. And next time, we're going to do some fun theater exploration. Prepare yourself for a journey that's fun, profound, and truly eye-opening. Until then,
In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.